country and to meet with people like you who are trying to do great things with multi-faith engagement in your communities. And it's really so wonderful to see these kinds of events happening all over the country, and to be part of them is just really exhilarating. So I commend you. I commend the planning committee for putting this event together today, and for the wonderful ways that you are building bridges and helping each other to understand each other better and to work better together in your community. I'm going to start off with a couple of questions for our faith leaders today, and then hopefully you all will have some questions that you want to contribute to our conversation. So if you do, please look on your bookmark, and there's a little QR code there at the bottom where you can text your questions, and they will magically appear on my phone, and I will ask our panelists those questions. But I'm going to start off, first of all, by asking our panelists. We've seen a lot of significant issues in different faith communities arise over the last 5 to 10 years. And I'd like to ask each of the faith leaders up here, what are the most compelling or most significant issues that you are facing as a faith group in your community here in South Carolina? So I'm going to put on the spot and start with our rabbi over here, and then we can follow after the rabbi whoever wants to speak after him to answer this question.
Thank you so much. This is an easy one, so thank you for giving me this one. It's for the security has always been a real issue with Jewish installations and Jewish facilities, Jewish community centers, schools, and synagogues around the world. Since October 7th of last year, this has been accelerated all over the world, but especially in the United States, where there has been, if you just look at the statistics of hate crimes by religion, it's like the FBI's numbers are completely off the chart when it comes to Jewish installations. So, and coupled with the fact that Jewish mothers are professional warriors, so that there are generations of honing this skill, this skill of warring down. So it's really becomes very, very difficult to operate and to have synagogue services. We're talking about special facilities which weren't built with security in mind, where you have windows and things which weren't facilities. If you go around Europe, you would almost never see a synagogue with honors in it, because most of them are just in nondescript buildings, and what will give it away would be an armed guard outside. And then you say, oh, why is there an armed guard outside this dentist's office? And then you'll look and you'll see it's probably a synagogue or a Jewish facility. But in the United States, that has never really been an issue. And for us personally, we built our center 9 years ago, and it's glass, right? Because who would have thought 9 years ago we would have done? But now we have to have a police officer, an armed police officer outside every single day in order to allow preschool parents to drop off their children and them to feel comfortable. So that's definitely one of the greatest concerns that we have.
Thank you. Why don't we move to Bishop Daniels?
Over there.
Over here.
I thought the Jewish rabbi did a extraordinary job. I agree with him that safety becomes a concern, not just for our brothers and sisters of the Jewish race and faith, but for all of us. And I think, especially us, since 2015, it's not just in America, all over the world. When I became the bishop of South Africa, they met me at the airport. They had 12, we call them G7. Y'all can see how short I am, right? They had a guy 6'8" to go escort me in the convention, and I told him I can't do that. He said, why? I said, well, y'all stay back here. First, the last bishop owe y'all, and I have to pay that $28,000. I don't know how I'm gonna get it. But I'm going to go down this aisle by myself with Jesus. So I get up there and I said to them, if you're trying to kill me, I didn't do anything to you, kill me by the way. just kill me, bullet in my brain, I'm gone. Because if you don't kill me, if you kill me, I'm insured for $1.5 million. My wife will cry, but you will think I'm a wise man. I would have done that for her. If you don't kill me, I can run between the houses quicker than you because I'm an African. The rest of the schooling walls, everybody started clapping, they came up there, danced, all 3,000 of them. But I said that was a reality of mine, but even in our church, we got undercover licensed police in our services because of what happened to us, the Emmanuel 9, and because of some of the stuff that is happening, which for me, that's why I love South Carolina. I don't believe none any of that thing will happen to us anymore, even though we have to be cautious, we have to be due diligence. But I believe that the people I see here, and more that represent the 3.4 million South Carolinians, that they are good, decent, peace-loving, caring people. You are. Help me, turn to somebody and say, we are the best of the best. Well, I didn't hear you. We are the best of the best. And we set the example for America and the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. President Claire?
My kids know I'm not a president of anything, but in any case, I'll try not to repeat the last two speakers. It's kind of easy. First, while yes, we know there are threats out there, I can say that we have never encountered personally in South Carolina any significant attack of any sort. A comment now and then, and I think there was some extra toilet paper on the yard one year, but nothing serious. But we're a very small community. Up until 3 years ago, Muslims in that part of South Carolina had to go across the river driving an hour and a half to get to the Islamic centers in Augusta. But 3 years ago, we purchased a disused church and converted it into our own masjid, which is a word for a small mosque. And we only have, in a typical service, maybe 10 men and 2 women. Okay, that's the extent of our congregation, if you will. Now it changes, and there'll be a week that we get maybe double that, but we're very, very small. We don't have a professional imam. We take turns trying to do the job of an imam. So our greatest concern is just growing up, so we can be like a big mosque.
Anyone else want to address this question?
I'll address it from a slightly different angle. To echo, yes, we, like most other African American churches I know now, have armed security, but we didn't have that pre-2015, the Emmanuel 9 massacre, and that's a reality. But it's kind of interesting on, so this is not, yeah, it has to do with being a religious minority in this sense. In the 2008, I think it was, federal housing law, there was a stipulation regarding non-discrimination in issues related to gender, sexuality, to go along with all of the other protected clauses. And little known, never talked about, but maybe 2011, 12, somewhere in there, the thought was in Colombia that clause would be enforced in law for organizations doing business in the city of Columbia, and the talk was how far could we take this in enforcing it. You might remember at the same time the conversation was happening, of course this is during the Obama administration, same conversation was taking place in Houston and other places where there was talk of censoring pastors' sermons who spoke against issues that might have been offensive to persons in the LGBTQ community. So that was a major issue. It was a major issue that led to meeting with some of the representatives here who were on this panel, as well as other persons in the city of Columbia, mayor, city council, et cetera, to talk them down from wanting to push this agenda on the churches and other religious organizations, or any organization, Boy Scout, Girl Scout, any organization that did business with the city. So speaking as someone who's in the evangelical community, but someone who also deals a lot with the public, our church has a very large public program that deals with a lot of public school children, and so we're not discriminatory, but the idea that there would be a push to force us to disavow our religious convictions in order to adhere to these mandates, whether they are state, federal, or local, that to us was a problem. It still remains a problem. For us, even now, as a community, when it comes down to talk about operating after-school programs, summer programs, sports leagues, and other things that churches do in order to serve community, if you're doing that well, to be forced into adopting a way of looking at the world, however defined, however supported by science and by good sense in terms of how you educate children, what you allow them to do on their own or not. That is, I think, aside from the safety and security thing, in terms of just talking about the right of churches and religious organizations, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, or whatever, all the way across the spectrum. That, it seems to me, is one of the more critical, probably, I would say, it's the most critical once I get beyond the safety issue, because you're talking about the children. You're talking about what you can or cannot, should or should not teach children, allow them to do. And again, I speak from the vantage point of being a pastor, a person who's a church, serves more kids than probably any group in our community, except the YMCA. So there's a vested interest in serving kids. There's also a vested interest in making sure that you give them options and don't force feed adults agendas on them, which is what I believe a lot of what's happening in the public square now around this issue and the whole issue of shaming is a problem, is an issue that for me as a spiritual leader and as a community leader, I think needs lots more attention. And so that's one of the reasons why I welcome participating on this panel. Because,
Thank you.
well,
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Yes. One of the deepest biases, is this one? Okay. One of the deepest biases in American history is anti-Catholicism because of the circumstances of our nation's founding and the deep suspicion that Catholics could not be good Americans because in the estimation of Thomas Hobbes, we owe allegiance to a foreign potentate, meaning the Pope. So it was a long slog to establish the legitimacy of the Catholic institutional life and the honesty of Catholic participation in civic life from the very beginning. One manifestation of that is the parallel school system created by the Catholic Church in the United States beginning in the early 19th century, which was created by our bishops and staffed by women religious. Because the earliest public schools were essentially Protestant schools. Public schools, as we now understand them, did not exist until the early 20th century, when the progressive movement took over the public education functions in this country. And so to keep Catholic children Catholic, the bishops thought we have to have our own schools. And because the schools were run by sisters who worked for room and board, basically, there was no real compensation, there was no pension plan. We were able to run them for tiny amounts of money that allowed us to welcome the children of poor immigrants into those schools and launch them into their professions in the wider world. But that's no longer true, because the supply of young women becoming religious began to dry up in the 1970s. And now almost all of our Catholic school teachers are laymen and women who have to have real salaries and health insurance and retirement plans. And so it costs us essentially the same to run our schools that it costs anybody else. And yet, because of the history of anti-Catholicism in the United States, institutionalized in many states by laymen bigots, we are shut out from any ability to get financial assistance, not for the Catholic Church, but for the parents who want to put their children in schools that are Catholic in whatever sense. So one of the structural injustices facing Catholics in the United States today is the ludicrous argument that it's unconstitutional for public funds to be used in any way to assist parents to put their children in schools run by the Catholic Church. A case can be made, and I won't make it here, that that's patently false. And yet, because of the deep prejudice that remains throughout the United States, it's a very difficult case to make, even to reasonable people who are sympathetic to the cause of religious freedom, that an injustice is being done to Catholics in particular by making it impossible for funds to be used by parents to provide for the education of their children as they would like to do. And that has an immediate practical effect everywhere, including in South Carolina.
Yes, and when I was at Beckett, we actually worked on a lot of cases to eradicate those state lane amendments around the country, and there's been some actually great wins at the Supreme Court recently addressing this issue of religious institutions receiving public funds. I'm thinking of Trinity Lutheran and its progeny. So I think we're working in the direction of making it more equalized and making sure that there's not discrimination against religious institutions for receiving public monies. But you're right that there are a lot of state lane amendments out there that have not been challenged and that need to be challenged. So yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a comment on a different topic, but I will say, just so those of us who feel differently might have a voice too, I agree with you that anti-Catholicism has been terrible in this country. On the other hand, as a product of public schools, I'm sensitive to the fact that public funding is what makes education in this country happen, it's what makes democracy happen. So I strongly want my tax dollars to go first to the public schools, but that's just my opinion. My biggest challenge this year has been one that has been sort of taboo to talk about, but I think this is the right place to bring it up, and that has been the Israel-Gaza thing. Because ever since October 7th, people have either been grieving or also grieving, angry, hurt, every kind of upset you can imagine. And of all places where you'd hope that we could have productive conversations to support each other, you'd hope that would be an interfaith venue. but it's just been too raw. And what most Americans don't understand is that all of those situations, I say all of it because it's not just two, are very complex, very nuanced, and most of us just don't have the background to fully understand. What we do understand is people's suffering. My predecessor in this position with IPSC, Dr. Adrian Bird, shared with us a few months ago about dialogue they had set up with the students where he's serving as chaplain now at Queen's University in Charlotte. And he said, we thought we had worked so hard, and we had created this safe space, or what the students call brave space, and we thought, you know, we had a format where they could each be able to say how they felt, and he said, you know, basically it boiled down to two sides, and one side shared their thoughts, and the other side had a meltdown, and it just dissolved into a big argument. And he said the lesson that he got was that these students were newly arrived on the scene relative to, for example, our interfaith group, where some of our relationships are as much as 14 years old now. And that it takes time, and that's why I said in my talk this morning that we've built these bridges month by month, conversation by conversation, dinner by dinner, and then it does take slow growth, and it takes the personal challenge of learning how to listen to each other. But that's been the most difficult thing for me, and I just want to say that to acknowledge that there may be other people here who've experienced the same thing. And I don't know that it's going to get better, except that we might all get better at being able to sit down together in a safe space so that we can talk.
Just briefly. First of all, after Hannah was introduced, I was going to make a motion that we all be quiet on the panel and just listen to Hannah with those credentials. Bishop Johnson, Reverend Johnson mentioned the Mother Emanuel shooting. Does anyone know who Darren L. Johnson is? A couple of you. Darren Johnson is what's called in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints a stake president. That's someone who presides over multiple congregations. That stake was the Charleston stake. And he led his congregations of Latter-day Saints to fast for the members of Mother Emanuel. This is not, it's a different angle on what happened. I'm just suggesting, and by the way, there's a new movie out that's very anti-Catholic that my wife and I have absolutely refused to go see. And so I think if we can model how to be peacemakers. Not everybody up here follows Jesus as the Son of God. I do, and he said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And so, and our leaders, Latter-day Saint leaders, emphasize that point as well, peacemaking, bridge building. So it's not only what happens to us, it's what happens to others. And I would invite us all to respond by making peace and building bridges when these things happen.
Which is a great segue into my next question, which is, what are your congregations or faith communities doing to engage in multi-faith efforts, to build bridges, to increase understanding, and to serve together in your communities? I'd love for you to just not be shy about sharing maybe some of your success stories and how this has manifested for you in your faith communities, and maybe some of the successes that have come out of it, or maybe some of the struggles. Either way, but I'd love to have us learn a little bit today about how different communities are addressing the multi-faith engagement, and what does that look like. So any volunteers? All right, great. Go ahead.
Again, recognizing we're a very small community, but we do two things essentially. Some of us participate in interfaith activities. We're an affiliate of Holly's organization down in Aiken, where we have a raft of different folks who participate from time to time. I mean, some months it's maybe Sister Pam and ourselves who are there, and some months there might be 5 or 10. It just depends. But the other thing that we do is we simply try to be active in charitable activities within the community, where we meet people from other faith groups, and they meet us, and we know each other's religious backgrounds, and we all work together. I mean, my favorite right now is building homes for the homeless, but there are other things we do as well, feeding the homeless, and others.
Our primary means of reaching out across religious, racial, cultural lines is through our outreach programs that primarily focus on kids and families, but go beyond that to doing cultural things, like start a little dance troupe with kids from our academy that open to kids from the community. We do any number of things as it relates to doing summer camp. We have the largest summer camp in the Irma area outside of the YMCA that services kids from all backgrounds and families. Feeding programs, doing stuff around holiday times. We kind of do that 12 months out of the year. And it's all community from our church and through our nonprofit. So it's not just, kind of sitting down with leaders of religious organizations, but putting things on the ground that bring people together. That's our focus.
That's great, thank you. Anyone else?
Sure. In many parts of the United States, especially in the Northeast, the industrial Midwest, the Far West, Catholics constitute the majority of the population, or a plurality. Here in South Carolina, statewide, it's about 3%. It's a tiny presence. In Charleston County, in Greenville County, and in other parts of the state, that can go up to 10, 12, even 15% because of the concentration in those few places. Get out into the country, and there may not be a baptized Catholic in 100 square miles. So that puts us in a different situation than the Church in Massachusetts or New York. And in Greenville, where I serve as pastor, it's an ecumenism of the trenches, serving the homeless, the urban poor, through cooperative ventures with the usual suspects, the Salvation Army, the homeless shelters, the soup kitchens. But in Greenville, a particularly interesting development was that Miracle Hill, which is a charity organized during the Great Depression, has always kept arm's reach from the Catholic Church because, like many of the fundamentalist Protestants of the upstate, they regarded Catholics as pagans who are deluded into thinking we're Christians. Right? This is the overheated rhetoric of the 16th century lives on, and these are deeply held and rationally considered convictions of theological truth to them. So they weren't ready to extend the hand clasp of Christian fellowship because they really think we're not Christians. And yet, and I'm sure the Latter-day Saints know 2 or 3 things about that. And yet, as the years went by, Miracle Hill found more and more of its support coming from Catholics. And the crunch finally came when Miracle Hill was facing total exclusion from being an organizer of foster care because they would not accept applicants to serve as foster parents from same-sex couples. And they were on the verge of losing massive outreach throughout the state. At which point, the executive director came to see me, and the thaw began. The ecumenism of the trenches began when he realized that without the ongoing financial, logistical support of Catholics and the cooperation of the Diocese of Charleston in being a friend of the court in their case, that they would probably lose the ability to function in this crucial means of outreach. And it was a turning point, which has borne fruit no one expected.
It's great. Adversity brings friendships. Yes, Bishop, do you want to go ahead?
I like all the speakers remark, but especially Ella Cook. And I want to, our sister who spoke so well. I think I want to lift up two things. Most of our challenges, our calling, can be solved through relationship. When I was pastoring, one of the places I pastor is Newberry, South Carolina. And the community that I passed had problem with Swindle police, city police, and the sheriff. So I decided we were going to have a law enforcement appreciation service. And the head of my trustee board and they were the officials of the church, and I was young and crazy with plenty of hair. And I said, no, we're going to have it. They said, we're not going to have it. And there's some words I don't want to repeat. That you don't understand what you're doing. You bring in these sheriff and this, that. But I went to Sheriff Foster. He's still living in Soda Frank. This is 20 plus years ago. And I said, I want to have a Sunday service dedicated to the appreciation of law enforcement officers. And we'll feel. Well, my board meeting, they said all kinds of things. The head of my trustee board, he's my friend, I can call him. He was on the school board chair, he walked out. But we had it. And it took us about 5,400 to feed everybody. And this guy was mad with me that I'm used to the church money. In that service, there were Catholic, there were 7, 8 different groups represented. Even there was a police guy who belonged to the Latter-day Saints. So I told them, separate the offering, because some of them was about money. I know it was not about money, they have other issues. Racism and discrimination is not always white and black, it's a human thing. So at the end of the service, those brothers put in more money than the 5,000 that we spent. But what took place was the whole law enforcement apparatus in Newberry changed. I mean, I'm driving on Broad River Road and Sheriff Foster comes and we got 4 guys, 3 white boys, a young man and a black guy. And the black guy was the son of Brother Hill who said some ungodly thing to me. So I called him and said, go to the sheriff office, we got an issue. He went there, that was his son. If we had not had that service, this son would have been in jail and lost everything. But because of that, Hill, the next year, he had white pay for the food. They volunteered to pay for the food. I was driving to Newberry for the board meeting, and I'm ashamed to tell you, but I was speeding. So that before they stopped me, there were 5 police on me. So they stopped me, and the guy had a hand on the gun. He looked in the car and said, oh, you are. And I said, I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed. and he said, where you going? I was going to a board meeting. He said, follow us. They had one police ahead of me and one behind me. They took me to the church, and my members were out, because they stopped me. It took some time. And when they saw the police, they were scared, but the guy said, no, we were speeding and we got in because he was coming to your meeting. The whole psyche and the relationship were transformed by just one idea of bringing people together Sunday morning And by the way, they did everything, all the police, all the highway patrol, they did everything on that program. I think sometimes churches need to not be a bunker. A religious institution need to reach out because some of the fears we have are not real fears. The law enforcement officers are just like us. I pray for them because when they leave their home, it's dangerous for them out there. And I think the group that can bring that love and connection is institution like us, church. Institution. I have benefited personally, but I didn't do it. I didn't know I would benefit. I haven't had a ticket in 20 years.
Thank you. Elder Corbin? Do you want to go ahead and talk about multi-faith engagement and what that
Did
looks
you
like?
want me to?
Yes.
I wasn't intending to, but I
Okay, great.
will. Well, continuing the story, briefly, Darren Johnson initiated a collaboration with Mother Emanuel, and that grew and grew, and eventually the church learned about an effort to establish what became the International African American Museum in Charleston on Gadsden's Wharf, and then collaborated on that. David Golcher was there, Elder Bednar was there, Elder Bowen and I, and Tom Reed and others, and we came out, met with the board, and then the church made a sizable donation to that museum, which the intention of which was to help the people find their ancestors, to turn the hearts of the children to their fathers and mothers, as the Bible talks about. So there are a lot of ways to do it. Father Newman, we'd love to hear about trench ecumenism, and we'd love to work with anyone on this panel. So please reach out and let us know how we can be of help.
Thank you. Anyone else on this side? You good? Okay. One of the audience members sent me this question. It was also a question I was originally going to ask. What are some of the ways that your faith group has focused on the rising generation, particularly post-COVID, and how do you involve them, the rising generation, in multi-faith engagement and also to defend religious freedom? I'm just going to start with a little story from our area. Some of the youth in our congregation reached out to a Hindu temple. Many of the friends that they had at school were Hindu from India, and created a multi-faith engagement at the youth level, an event where they were able to understand each other better and get to know each other better and understand each other's religious beliefs better. That's just one example from our congregation where we live. As parents, my husband and I have always tried to expose our children to their friends' faith environments. Being a troop leader for Girl Scouts, we had about 7 different religions represented in our troop, and we took our kids to, their Muslim friends' mosque for Friday prayers to see what they do in their mosque. We took our children to their friends' Hindu temple. We've taken our children to a Jewish synagogue, just trying to expose them to different faith communities and to see the ways that religion helps their friends be better people and to contribute better to their schools and to their communities. So there's lots of different ways to do this, and I just would love to hear some of the ways that you all on this panel have engaged your youth ministries, particularly after the difficulties of COVID, to sort of get out of themselves into the community, work in a multi-faith environment, and defend religious freedom. So if any of you have any stories in this realm, I'd love to hear them.
Interfaith tends tends to draw people who are more mature in age, but we all have children, we all have young people in our lives, so we have tried different things over the years, and so I'll just mention some of those. That is not to say that we have an active, ongoing youth ministry, but for several years we had an art contest that was about religious freedom, and it was through the schools. We reached through the art departments of all the public schools, and they submitted things. We gave prizes, and at our annual spring festival called Peace in the Park, we awarded those, made a big hoo-ha about it. So they loved it. And then for a few years, we made a printed calendar. We had a professional designer among us who did anybody here ever get one of those interfaith calendars? They were gorgeous, and 1 year we did, 2 years we did the children's part. So that got the message to them, because we said you can do anything as long as it has to do with this, this, and this. We gave them about 4 different slogans. We've also had groups do activities during Interfaith Harmony Month, which is, by the way, there's a governor's proclamation each January that January is South Carolina Interfaith Harmony Month. So be thinking about what you might want to do next year to be part of that. We've had teen groups do a service project